All right, everybody. Good morning. Happy Friday. You made it through another week. And you all made it through another pre-conference, or maybe your first pre-conference. So, woohoo! Thank you, everybody. All right. So, as we get started this morning, I want to just take a few minutes before we jump into our primary event, which is the Year in Review, to spend a few minutes just talking about how Americans for the Arts is working for all of you, and just let you know about some of the resources, some of the events, and some of the things that we've been doing to make sure that hopefully will make your lives a little bit easier, or the best that we can do that for you anyway. One is, just as a reminder, launched last year from a grant from the NDA. The Public Art Resource Center is your hub to find tools, best practices, case study guides, and more, in a wide variety of topics from murals and cultural equity to collection management and program planning. So check it out. It's just americansforthearts.org/PARC. If you're looking for more field education opportunities outside of the pre-conference, ArtsU, the Americans for the Arts field education platform, is really the best place to look. So at artsu.americansforthearts.org/publicart, where we include online learning opportunities, new ways to connect with colleagues in person, as well as other career development information. Research, which we're slowly getting on top of, and coming up this summer, we are going to be launching the results of a public art program survey that we did last year, so you'll be seeing that. We'll also be launching 2 directories, one for the public art programs and one for public art services. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be talking about them more as over the next several weeks. And that leaves us sort of one of the primary things that Americans for the Arts does for all of you is advocacy work. And so I want to spend a little bit of time just talking specifically about 3 things that we have happening that can really hopefully help support the work that you're doing on the ground. One is the Arts Mobilization Center. This is our primary site for information on arts and advocacy work, from policy statements to arts action updates and more. Specifically, I want to point out the statement on the intersection of the arts, history, and community dialogue, which was designed and launched to support of community dialogue and around Confederate memorials and monuments. This statement was launched in response to the violent events in Charlottesville, Virginia last year, which led to the death of Heather Hare. And then brand new, right off the presses for all of you, on the tables you'll see Why Public Art Matters 2018. This is a document that builds off of a green paper that was done by the PAN Council about 5 or 6, 7 years ago, which we expanded on and includes information on 5 different ways that public art can positively impact your communities. So use it as a tool to help make your statement and make your argument for why public art is important to you and your communities as you're talking to your stakeholders. And it was created this year also in collaboration with the 2018 Public Art Network Council. And then lastly, I just want to touch on this work that we've been doing for the past few years. This is around the federal support of arts and transit work. Just a little bit of background, starting in 1977, the federal government supported and encouraged the inclusion of art and transit projects. Over the past several decades, transit art has evolved into a distinct field. Transit agencies have worked with artists, design teams, and communities to enhance public transit systems for the last 40 years. Unfortunately, as of December 2015, the use of federal funds for arts on new transit projects is prohibited per the Fixing America's Transportation, otherwise known as the FAST Act. So, in 2016, we have been working with a dedicated group of committee of people from arts and transit leaders from around the country to really kind of figure out how we're going to kind of combat this, really, is what we're trying to get at. The impacts include removing federal funding to design and build bus, subway, light rail, commuter rail, trolley, or ferry projects, and it prohibits the use of fundings to pay for artists. Specifically, it actually says that in the bill, in the act. The restriction dates to December 4th of 2015, and so any grants that came after that from the federal government is causing that impact around the country. However, we were quite lucky and very fortunate, and I hope she's here today. In spring of 2017, arts advocate Katie Stiegel reached out to her congressional representative Adams of North Carolina, which led to the development of something called the STAR Act. The STAR Act is Saving Transit Art Resources, and Adams is a Democrat. We are very lucky and very excited that she is still interested in this, and she's been working with us on this, on trying to get this act passed for over a year now. And what we're trying to do at this point, due to the current political climate, is to really make this a co-sponsored bill, but also a bipartisan bill. So we've been trying to hunt down a Republican representative who can be a part of this and sign on to this bill before we introduce it. We've been working with that. We've had a few leads here and there, but we're still sort of figuring that out. So if you know anybody, let us know. You can either send any questions to myself, Patricia Walsh, or I'm also working within Americans for the Arts with our Director of Federal Affairs, Kate McClanahan. So, without further ado, the main reason you guys are all here, which I'm really excited about, I can't wait for you guys to hear our wonderful jurors and panelists today. We're going to be talking about the 2018 Pan Year in Review. The Public Art Network Year in Review is the only national program that specifically recognizes public art projects and is an excellent advocacy tool and educational tool for those who are impacting their community through public art. You can learn more about this program as well as projects that were selected previously and this year's at americansforthearts.org/YIR. You can get your own copy of the 2018 project by visiting the on-site bookstore just outside our door here. And I hope you all had a chance to visit the first year of the Pan Year in Review Gallery, where we actually printed out each of the projects and had them up. And they're going to be up throughout the rest of the convention as well. We know one of the things that you've been asking us, that the council's been asking of us, is how to engage the Year in Review more holistically within the full convention, not just within the pre-conference. So that's what we're working on, and hopefully more people will come and see all the great work that's been happening and that we'll be doing, that you guys have been doing all last year. So with that, I now introduce you to our three jurors. We're going to have Brian Lee Jr., Patrick Merrill, Karen Mark, and their moderator for this morning, Lester Berg, to the stage. So welcome them.
Good morning. I feel the energy reflects that you're at a nightclub hearing about public art last night. Anyone? That was a great 5x5. Thank you to the council members who put that together. And thank you, Patricia, for all your work working with the council and getting this conference to be the success that it is year after year. So one thing that the council has discussed at length each year, each meeting, is how to mix up the year in review. Some years we feel it's too heavy on the presentation. Some years it's too built around the perspective of an individual juror or two. Sometimes it really reflects the community in which the program is being held. And sometimes it reflects what's happening in the field, and we need to sort of talk about the field and the fact that we are many things. We are traditional or classic public art, site-specific, percent for art. We're tied to a transit system or a park or a public place with an arts council and oversight. But we're also, of course, social practice. For a few years, I thought, that'll go away. It's not going away. It's here. Community engagement. I sort of had felt at one time that artists are being asked to be social scientists, but no, artists are asking to be engaged and involved in their community, and not just to make objects, but to create experiences and sort of bring people together and really focus on issues. And we are living in a time of big issues. There's sort of I wouldn't call him an elephant, but I'll be kind, so I won't refer to an animal. Anyway. But, you know, we're living in a very interesting time for the country, and it affects our field. I think in a year we're going to see art that really has responded to that. We're seeing that now, and we have three jurors who each bring a unique perspective from both ends of the table. I'll call it classic public art because traditional sounds old. But, you know, it's the Percent for Art that was formed in the 80s, the Percent for Art programs, the community engagement, social practice, civic space, how we work with those spaces. I'm going to ask each juror to sort of just give a word or two about how their perspective brought them to the table. I'll start with Karen Mack, not Mark, Executive Director and founder of LA Commons.
Is this live? Oh, yeah. Good morning. LA in the house. Woo! My crew is here. So I founded 15 years ago now an organization called LA Commons, and our focus is really on using artistic processes to connect people to neighborhoods in Los Angeles and the broader community. We do public art projects, we do festivals, you know, creative placemaking. When we started, of course, it wasn't called creative placemaking, right? But now, you know, we fit squarely into that category and really have a social justice bent because we work with a lot of the advocacy organizations to support their work and support community members in bettering their lives and their communities.
Thank you. And why don't you, oh, we each have a mic. Brian Lee from New Orleans is founder of his firm Co-Locate.
Nailed
and
it.
he'll tell you how to spell that.
Well, no, I won't. Yeah, I will. How you doing? Name's Brian Lee. I run a small design practice called Co-Locate Design, COLLOQATE. That practice is born of a few things. I'm an architect by trade, designer by trade, but I worked as the Place and Civic Design Director for the Arts Council of New Orleans for 3 years, and in that position, was able to work with not only the Percent for Art program, but more broadly the policies and procedures that define how we integrate our civic design processes into the built environment in a real holistic, comprehensive way, and make sure that our artists are actually having a say in those larger conversations. And so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and this is kind of how I joined this room, but I hope that I can kind of stay involved in the conversation here as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And artists are always, last but not least, no. Patrick Merrill is a local artist. You may have seen his work at the airport when you arrived. Very thoughtful, large-scale, landscape-oriented work. And when I say local, he has his bike helmet under the chair. So that's pretty local. A word.
So I came to this as an artist. I've been an artist for over 20 years. Public art is a pretty big component of what I do. I have a really broad range of scale and scope, and I understand the making, the implementation of the actual art. Little less involved with the social practice side of things and the civic design, so I'm bringing the perspective of, I guess, as you said, traditional public art. Classic.
We need a better word.
Yep.
Thank you. So we're doing this a little differently. I want you to know where the jurors are coming from. And instead of spending a lot of time on the presentation of the images of the work, and I think we all know the images don't really tell the whole story, we're going to go through that in 20, 30 minutes. And then we're going to have a conversation and a dialogue about what work was really impactful, where the field is, how it's emerging, what trends we see. And toward the end, if there are questions, really interesting, good questions, we'll see if we have time for that. So we're going to start. And the jury came up with 3 broad categories. And the first is site-specific art. And Patrick will begin. So thank you.
Okay, there's a lot of them. This was a real pleasure, I think, for all 3 of us to go through this many projects. I'm just gonna introduce the site-specific, oh, there we go. So, Far From This Setting in Which I Now Find Myself by Meredith Janes on the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy in Boston. Also at the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy, oh wait, sorry. These are, I forgot, there's 5 images for each one. Pretty interesting piece, though, as far as putting you in this forced perspective. Here in Denver, we have a Sky Song by Nick Gertz and Ryan Elmendorf with Denver Arts and Venues. It's over, I forget the name of the pavilion right now. Levitt Pavilion. Yep, a new performance pavilion here in Denver. It's a sound and interactive piece. Oh. There you go. All right, the Soto track, a series of murals and surface paintings. Let's see, by Gage Hamilton there with For Culture, King County Metro Transit, Seattle. There were several of these in this entry. City Fragments by Lead Pencil Studio, Annie Han and Dan Mahalio. Touchstone, USAA, Seattle, Washington. Not so fast? All right, we got a lot of them, but that's cool. That Child of Fleeting Time by Kyungmi Shin and Shin Gray Studio, Bronson Studios, Hudson Pacific Properties in LA. Now this one has a video that we have to, this is the only one with a technical issue. Yep. Okay. This is the hard part, getting back. Okay, there we go. And then go from all right, we're back. And then advance. Yep. The next slide. There we go. All right. Next one, Sharp by Havel Ruck Projects in Houston, Texas. Seeds of Sharptown, a temporary project using a fire-damaged home. Resonant Progression by Royden Mills, Edmonton Arts Council, Alberta, Canada. Is anyone here from Canada? Convergence by Dowie Bloomberg, Utah Public Art Program, Taylorsville, Utah. Surface by Ivan Toth de Pena, Charlotte Area Transit System, Cornelius, North Carolina. Spaces of Hope by Mehdi Galdianlu. I'm not sure if I hate screwing up names, but thank you. The Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy in Boston. Sure. I mean, this was actually one of the ones I want to highlight in our conversation later. But this was a fantastic mural on the side of a ventilation building that's part of that Rose Kennedy Conservancy Greenway. Yeah, I'd like to get into it more later. The balloons represent dreams. See Her by Ann Lewis, Now and There, Boston, Massachusetts. This is a mural addressing the incarceration of women and actually involved the participation of incarcerated women in the execution. Still Spinning by Al Price, Floriculture, King County Solid Waste Division in Bellevue, Washington. These are all bicycle rims, if you can't see it completely. Time, temporary installation made for the environment by Joanne Keene Lopez, Alyson Packer, Joshua Willis, and Sarah Cummings, and Jody Miller. New Mexico Arts, Edgewood, New Mexico. The Fair-Haired Dumbbell by James Jean, or is it Jean? Guerrilla Development, Portland, Oregon. It's a massive, basically building mural. The Meeting House by Mark Riegelman, the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. This one's addressing the, well, maybe the sinking or the floating of American culture. Triumph by Richard Deutsch, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Palo Alto Healthcare System, Palo Alto, California. Rustition, Hide and Seek, Seek and Find by Carl Unash, City of Montevideo, Minnesota. Life of Tree by Hypersonic and Plebeian Design, Bill Washbaugh and Jeff Lieberman, Utah Public Art Program, Salt Lake City, Utah. Let's see. Everyone by Ann Hamilton, Landmarks, the Public Art Program of the University of Austin, Austin, Texas. These are all photographs addressing the visualization of touch within the healthcare environment. And part of this program where a lot of books were, hundreds of books were handed out. I think 900 are free. Wavelength by Emily White, Broward County Cultural Division, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Suspended piece in their airport renovation. Denver Urban Arts Fund and the Raw Denver Mural Project by Audrey Sykes as the lead artist. Denver Arts and Venues Urban Art Fund program. You may have seen some of these on your bus tour yesterday. Convergence, LA, by Susan Narduli, Refik Anadol, Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles, Greenland, USA. This is a digital installation of video. Books of a Feather by Dixie Fern Gay, commissioned by the City of Houston through Houston Arts Alliance. Untitled by Micheline Thomas as part of the Innovative Transit Stations. This is MTA in Brooklyn, New York. Strap by Katie Fisher as part of the Innovative Transit Stations. Once again, MTA. This was all part of one selection. Brooklyn. Duration by Monica Bravo, also in Brooklyn. Ascent, let's see, Rudy Cherry is the administrator. Do we have the name of the artist? I forget. Ross? Kevin Kavorsky. It's a tonal composition at the Civic Center using the existing bell system. There he is. He's happy. .8 in Beijing by Janet Eckelman. The Solana Light Festival, attorney agency for Solana. Vessels by Nicole Kistler, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, also part of SPU. The Fluid by Chris Doyle, Metropolitan Transportation Authority, once again, this time in New York, New York. That concludes the site-specific traditional.
Karen will take us through social practice and a little into civic place because sometimes fields overlap. So how's the mic?
I think it's working well. So the first piece in this section is called On the Threshold, Salvage Stoops, and it's by Mural Arts Philadelphia. And this is part of the much larger initiative called Monument Lab, Public Art and History Project. And we have several works that were a part of that initiative, which was quite extraordinary in the engagement of Philadelphians in answering the question, what is an appropriate monument for Philadelphia today? And they engaged everyday people to answer that question, and then artists came up with artworks that responded as well. And so this one in particular is the artist actually took building materials from houses that were in disrepair and recreated the stoops on site. And then they were all sited in Washington Square Park. And you can see how the community engaged with the artworks. I think that's one of the great aspects of this project in general, is that it was, people were engaged all the way through, from the conceptualization through the actual monuments, and actually connecting with the monuments physically. This is If They Should Ask by Sharon Hayes, again, Mural Arts Philadelphia. And this piece actually, they found that only 2 of the many monuments in Philadelphia were dedicated to women, so they polled a group of civically engaged women, a diverse group of civically engaged women, to come up with names, and then they, these pedestals, various pedestals, the names were engraved. And again, you can see how the community is engaging with the work. Another piece, The Battle is Joined by Karen Oliver. So she took this monument and then covered it with mirrors. And so, I think the idea is really that the community can see themselves in the monument and really connect in a visceral way with this historic work. Moving on, this is Borderlands exhibition by Pedro Lush, Anita Yoel Ali, Carna del Rosario, Ryan Feddersen, Satpreet Kalan, Henry Luke, Reese Naemi, Crystal Shank, Inye Wokoma, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. And this was really an exhibition designed in response to the immigration issue that we're all watching unfold. And we all were taken by the energy exerted to create these works. This is my favorite. The next one is Harbor Light Mural by Aaron Sayer, Bianca Janine Pettis, and the Hennepin Theater Trust was a supporter in Minneapolis. And this project, and we'll be talking about these themes a little bit later, but this one addressed the theme of homelessness. This area, is home to historic theaters, but it's also home to the largest day use shelter in the Midwest. And so the goal of the artist was to really involve the homeless community in activities that, really use the power of art to create a positive sensibility among the participants in a project like this. So they had, they did the mural together that was just up, and they had this, they called it a county fair in town, because a lot of the homeless residents who are sheltering in and around this center could not make it to the actual county fair, so they created their own, which I love. So the next piece is Social Seed, and it's by Gurpreet Sarah, and supported by the Winnipeg Arts Council. And this is cited in a food co-op, and the idea was to memorialize the history of this food co-op. And so what they did was engaged the community that is part of the food co-op's constituency in art workshops to come up with a concept, and then they actually worked together to realize this tile mural. It's a fabric-covered tile that people painted, and the mural is a picture of the neighborhood with the colors representing the demographics from the time when the co-op was founded. This is Everything at Once by Mary Mattingly, and what's interesting about this project is that she's taken materials from the military, you see the bottom part, and then from an old school, and I think she's really commenting on the, our challenge in prioritizing, various aspects of our lives. So, we don't have a picture of inside, but inside there's a pool that people can go in and contemplate, while getting a sense of the materials that they're inside of. This is Martin Luther King Jr. Recuperative Care Center project by Sandy Rodriguez, and this was sponsored by the LA County Arts Commission. Sandy, who I know, worked with the residents, and this is similarly connected to the homeless community. This is a transitional facility, and so she worked with them to create these works that are now cited in the facility. The next project is Learning Lab, which is a community artist training program. The artists involved were Courtney Adair Johnson, Julia Whitney Brown, Elizabeth Williams, Xavier Payne, Alexander Bryant, Robbie Lynn Hunziger, and it's the Metro Arts, sponsored by the Metro Arts Program and Nashville Arts and Culture. And I was really an advocate for this project because I feel like, really supporting artists to do work in the community is very important. And often there's a desire to do it, but not necessarily the capacity. And so to provide that training, particularly with artists who are a part of the community where they want to work. We work with artists all the time, and it's hard sometimes to find artists who are local to do these projects. They range. This project is a sustainable farm for differently abled people, and this artist is working with them to create a pottery project. I'm not going to remember all of them. This one is addressing gentrification in one of the historically African-American neighborhoods in Nashville. This is a physical project. You can see the kids and their joy in interacting with this artwork, kinetic artwork. And I really enjoyed this one. This one was with the large Kurdish community in Nashville, which I was in Nashville recently, and I was very surprised at how diverse that city is. So this is one of their many ethnic groups that live there, and they actually did a archival project of gathering recipes from that community, this artist. And that's my set.
All right, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? So the first project that came to bear for me was the Hank Willis Thomas piece in Philadelphia, also part of the Mural Arts, the Monuments Lab program, which is dear friends of mine. All power to all people. Now, this project, again, is one of those projects that is colloquial in nature, has a language about it that is specific to not only the fact that Philadelphia not only did it not have any women as their monuments throughout the city, but it also didn't have any black people until recently, right? And so the ability to have a unifying message, a unifying consideration was really, really beautiful to see that implanted in that space, in that time. So you saw all sorts of people engaging with it. I think I have like 7 pictures of myself with my actual Afro pic. Okay, so the idea that we can, okay, this is a Stoneview Nature Center by Fallen Fruit, David Burns and Austin Young. It is in Los Angeles County, the Los Angeles County Arts Commission, Culver City, California. So the note I really had about this was that there is a way in which community building happens through art making. It is about the process, and the process in itself allows for a different variety of things to be produced, but ultimately you're creating community, and I think that in itself is such a beautiful thing. And you see that through the images and through the connections that they made during this process. So again, in the idea of community building, we're talking about the East Point Public Art Residency by Mary Cantu, Sam Lerma, Francisco Tavira, Francisco Cortez. I'm gonna say Junie Butler, Olivia Hinojosa, Jennifer Edmonds-Jones, Matthew Rushing, Scotch Willington, Curtis Brazil, Gabriel Santiago. Is the Public Art San Antonio, City of San Antonio, Texas. Again, part of this process that allows us to utilize the entire spectrum of the arts, whether that's performative or placemaking specific or long-term artistic conversations, happens during these residencies, happens during these opportunities. Give you a little bit more of that. Poetry on Buses by Jordan Imani Keith. For Culture, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Kings County Metro Transit, King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. It's a lot more there, water and land resources, you get it. Seattle Public Utilities and the Sound Transit with Seattle, Washington. Now, the mobility of public art, the ability for, we talk a lot about in this moment, how the kind of static notion of monuments or static notion of memorialization in public places codifies these narratives that don't necessarily track to the current communities that they serve. And this fights that in a bunch of different ways. The dynamism of the poetry itself and having workshops and classes that actually allow people to create their narrative and use their voice to tell those stories, and then to memorialize those in transit, in mobility, in a bunch of different places, making it omnipresent, I think is tremendous to see. All right. The Analog Scroll by Janet Zweig. Westmoreland Museum of Art, American Art, Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Now, I thought this project was entirely whimsical and really beautiful. The ability for one to have a moment in time with this piece over and over and over again is really transformative. I mean, I think those are the pieces that, at least for me, trigger a lot of memory in that moment. And so I hope that these pictures kind of resonate in that way. So as we're talking about moments, there's third spaces. So I'm a designer and architect by trade, and there are the public spaces, there are the private spaces, and then there are the transitional, the transactional spaces that happen, thresholds. And these beautiful moments where you can create, again, that sense of whimsy, that sense of a space that's never been seen is really beautiful. Oh, sorry. And this is Drift Inversion by David Franklin and Aaron Wilton, Park Creek Metropolitan District here in Denver. I'm gonna try to play that. WeHo Arts, The Plan, Data Visualization Projects by Maria del Carmen, La Madrid, Zamora, Sean, Noyce, Yamarel, City of West Hollywood, California. So again, part of the process making, but the opportunity for people to have voice consistently in the creation of that artwork and using data visualization to talk about what you want to see in your city at large is textbook community organizing, textbook community engagement relative to the arts. And seeing this as a process, a way in which they used balloons to kind of lift the dreams and the stories of people on high, and then to catalog those stories and place them in maps across the city. All right. Time and Place. The Finest Amenities by Sheldon Scott, City of Alexandria, Office of Arts, Alexandria, Virginia. So we talked a little bit earlier about like the moment. Performative arts create those moments. I think one of the most transformative projects that I ever saw was in New Orleans that struck me in this very same way. The ability for one to tell a story across the city in processional. Coming from New Orleans, where we do processional every Sunday, I appreciate that ability to tell that story over time and place. Story Days, Public Art Project by Alberto Rizzo, City of Phoenix, Office of Arts and Culture, Phoenix, Arizona. And again, this is a project that collected stories and starts to tell those stories through this work. Street Talk by Eric Abigard, Patricia McShane, City of Palo Alto Public Art Commission, NEA Artworks Grant, Palo Alto, California. This is another one of those data visualization projects that starts to take those stories and moments and collects them in particular categories and then allows them to be parsed through by the individuals engaging with the artwork itself. And the last one on my docket, Safe and Sound by Tomo Sato, City of Palo Alto Public Art Commission. It is also an NEA grant, Palo Alto, California. Again, this is one of those, moment-making pieces that allows people to, tell those stories in public view with other people, building community. There we go.
Thank you, jurors. I think you can all see there was a really rich and diverse and impactful array of artwork done in the communities and in cities and towns and throughout the country, and it's really impressive to see it all together. So a round of applause. And also, sometimes we forget the fabricators, the collaborators, those hardworking project managers. So really, everyone. And the reason there is a moderator here today is because the field has so many different strands and threads. We just wanted to see if it would help to connect those strands by having a conversation. I feel we gave Patrick so many to read that he didn't get into the level of detail that some of the other projects got. And that's no reflection on any of the projects. Artists think differently, you know, than managers. So, Patrick, do you want to begin by talking about any projects that really resonated with you as an artist and as a maker of art?
Is that better? There we go. I don't know. Yeah, so there are some projects that, I wish I could give everyone half an hour to speak about these projects, but one in particular, Everyone by Ann Hamilton, I just felt, it was the photographs in the healthcare environment in Austin, Texas, where the concept was to visualize the touch and the interaction between, patient and doctor, or nurse and patient. But the way it was executed was just so beautifully presented, and the photographs, the images are gorgeous. And then the dispersion of the final product as well, with the books that were handed out and the involvement of these people that were photographed. I think it appears through the submission, it was a highly impactful and beautifully executed project. There were a couple murals that I also wanted to highlight. Both are in Boston, coincidentally. See Her by Ann Lewis is the one about the incarcerated women. And I think the exposure of that mural in this city, the placement was great, but also just the involvement of incarcerated women to create the collage and create the mural itself and work with them, and to really tap into the potential of these women and the transition back out, all the options, and the potential available to them through the arts. Spaces of Hope by Mehdi Gadyanlu, Iranian painter who created the mural with the balloons, the people ascending the staircase with their balloons, and then the large red balloon and the Oculus at the top. It was in the description, it's a eulogy to the bombing, the marathon bombing of 2013, but I think it even carries on when you think about the dreams of where we are now and immigrants and all the people ascending a staircase of its own. And it's one of those works of art that continues to speak into the current context. And it's just beautifully executed once again with it's a difficult architectural building. It's not a perfect square. And the way he as a painter tapped into that was pretty interesting. And then there were two pieces that work with the shape of a home. One was the Meeting House by Mark Riegelman, also on the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and Sharp by Havel Ruck Projects in Austin. Both were executed with really high quality. The one in Austin I think is really interesting, taking a derelict building in a really unusual environment for public art, basically a neighborhood. You were so used to seeing these placed out in civic areas or where everyone's going to see them, but to have it on just a suburban street, I think was pretty interesting, in cutting this home-shaped hole through it, illuminated by the copper. And it became a very interactive piece that people entered, whereas the Meeting House is not necessarily something you can enter on the Greenway, but it has this great tension between floating and sinking, the buoyancy. Addressing American culture, is it sinking or floating, and where is it going with all of that? Once again, a temporary project, but highly successful. So.
Thank you. Is it me or the mic? Hello? So I think the divide between temporary and permanent is one we're all familiar with. And as Renee mentioned yesterday, maybe it's time to rethink what permanent means in our careers and generations and lifetimes. But let's talk to Karen now. What projects really resonated with you and sort of reflected what's happening in the world now in the communities you're engaged with? Anything you want to share about trends in art and what you're seeing?
Well, as you may have noted, we had several projects from the Monument Lab initiative, and that project resonated with me. I went to Philadelphia for the first time in November, actually, and we were there. My daughter's really into Hamilton, so we did like the whole Hamilton Trail. So I got to go to Independence Hall for the first time, and all of those major monuments to white men, So, just I mean, like in this seat of democracy, having this conversation about the democratization of public art was quite moving. And yesterday I actually got to hear the team talk about it, and it really deepened my respect for it even more. And what was interesting was they planned this project several years ago before, we've seen this trend of, transitioning monuments or thinking about the meaning of monuments. And so, I think Charlottesville hit right before the project opened. And I think it's a really great exclamation point to this national conversation that we're having about how do we want to represent ourselves in the public space, who gets represented, and how are we all able to see ourselves in the public realm, which is, for us as public art professionals, we're right at the center of this conversation. It's kind of gratifying in a way to have so much light shown on the public art profession.
Yeah, certainly. So in my role as an administrator for a while, we changed and not to say that this was a bad thing, but we had a public art for public art's sake kind of consideration. But our mission became really around public art for public good. And I think a lot of the work that you see presently is around the collective voice of people. As a partner to Monuments Lab and some of the work that we do, the conversation becomes very specific about object and field, right? So if we're talking about an object that is unto itself, that speaks for itself and tells its own story, versus the field itself, right? A space that is created that allows for the public to embed itself on that. You're seeing a lot of work that allows that to happen. And again, and the thing I was saying about the all power to all people is that it's not simply about an individual. See, Philadelphia has a monument now to Cato, and which is a beautiful monument. But this Afro-pick is a monument to every black and brown person in the city, right? And so those like the small little narrative changes in that are really, really important. And then I think the second thing is really those who are doing the work to think about how community organizing, community engagement tie into the public art realm. And trust me, it has such a broad impact, more than we even give it credit for. And as an architect, I see the front end of it being so valuable, right? To creating a project that is inherent to the people's voice. We have to be able to talk to the people to figure out that work. And so the 3 or 4 projects that I showed a little bit earlier that are explicitly talking about ways to not only talk at people, but talk with people and give people agency and build power are a tremendous direction for what we're doing as public art professionals.
Does this one work? Yes. Thank you. It's really great to get the perspective of the jurors who are viewing the work that was submitted. And really, you know, we're dealing with some important issues in the public realm these days. On the other side of the coin, awkward segue, there's materiality, there's technology. I mean, who remembers the year there were so many LED projects? It was a new thing, and they're affordable, and everyone wanted to do one. And now I think we're seeing every community really wants to address their monument issue, their history, and figure a way to do it. But then again, half the programs in this room that are represented by you are not in that. I work on the subway system. People are waiting for the train, it comes, they get on. But what are you, Patrick, seeing in the field of how technology and fabrication sort of is changing the way art is made and seen? And I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but good luck.
I think we're starting to see the influence of automation and, whether it's 3D modeling, where these projects and these ideas start well past the pen and paper, the pencil and the paper, and they're getting very acute. I think they're very clear. Maybe they're losing some of the nuance. I don't know. What I think will be interesting is to see how, as with every technology, how we embrace these and start to work with them on a more holistic level instead of jumping right to the newest, greatest, simplest, most efficient, cost-effective way of going about it, and bringing back some of the touch. And I see that resolving itself in current work. But as far as being on this panel and looking at the works, I think we were all looking at, because of where we are right now as a nation and a culture, next year, what we're going to be seeing coming out of this, and how do you, from all of these categories, how do you deal with these issues when the time and the issues are happening so quickly and so fast, and how do you get commissioned tomorrow and then it's still relevant, a year or 2 years, or in some cases, some of these projects last 10 years. How are these things going to iron themselves out?
Either of you want to add to that or build on it, or should I come up with a new Okay. And this is representative of the field. We have people making beautiful objects, contemplative spaces, site-specific, working with the architect, the developer, the parks group. And then we have people engaging with the people that live there that are impacted by federal policies, legislation. It's all public art. It's all the sphere that we work in. And I think this is a really pivotal year for what we're seeing just as the PAN Council, the public art community. Why don't you each leave us with some words of wisdom about where the field is and how to bring all the pieces of public art to a safe place.
What?
Safety is not my concern.
Come on. I just had a thought, though. You know, you take it for what it's worth. So we're working on a project right now. I was talking about this yesterday in LA. You know, one of our big challenges is civic engagement, and particularly among millennials. They have the lowest rates of participation, and you know, I think are really struggling to find their place in our city in some ways because the housing costs are so high and, you know, other issues. But, you know, I mean, they're a big part of the audience. And so the thing that we were talking about, and I know there's some of you in the audience, I'm not in that generation, but, you know, they have like a really high BS detector. So, like, really looking for authenticity in the work. And you know, so, you know, just putting up a piece without contextualizing it, I think, is a real challenge in speaking to this particular audience. And so, you know, thinking about how that cuts across all of these categories to make art that is, you know, really relevant. I go back to the work that I love so much that's in the MTA, Chris Doyle's piece. What's it called?
The Fluid.
The Fluid, which was like, it's you know, it's a lighting, I mean, what's the materials that piece is? It's
I'm looking at the project manager.
so it is an LED project, so it could be thought of as a cliche, I guess, but it is so dynamic, and I think you know, it creates this environment that the public really engage with, and it was temporary, right? So this idea of temporary activation to, you know, really inspire people's imagination, I think is important. And one of the reasons why we do temporary work is that I think over time people stop looking at the work, so to, you know, kind of keep it dynamic and flowing, so.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's a continuum that we often use in our work that talks about the individual and ephemeral all the way to the collective and permanent. And the idea that public art serves in that continuum as a touch point for people to engage in their public environment, to engage in the built environment in a more dynamic and more direct way is really powerful. And I don't know that that's always the thinking from the administrative side of things. But ultimately, again, millennials, we are all radical socialists, so a lot of, maybe not, but this one is. So, but part of that is that we have an opportunity to have more voice, more people with agency, more people with power as it determines the outcomes of our cities. And if public art and civic design are the initial touch point, that power is so useful for us to build better cities and to build better communities. And so I think we should I hope that you all take this as a challenge to be a part of the more local and national dialogue around how we build more holistic, better cities for all, and recognize yourselves and the work you do and the artists you work with as the initial touch point for larger dialogues around better cities.
And I just want to add, the monument, the lynching monument, you know, you brought that to mind for me because I think that is a really great, you know, it's emblematic of what you just said, you know, and I mean, I think all of you probably know. Do you want to describe it?
Yeah, so the memorial actually in Montgomery that just went up, which is, again, this piece that draws you into a historical moment in time that oftentimes we are not willing to dive into, but it also claims land, right? So some of us who are activists and who go in the streets and march and try to hold space and claim space, we get a chance to do that through these types of markers in our environment, right? It holds the space so that we can go to another place and challenge not only, you know, not authority necessarily, but challenge the oppressive kind of conditions in a particular place. And so that particular memorial does that in such a vivid and thought-provoking way that we should be thinking about the ways in which we can create systems of memory across the city, not only to our past, but the conscious consideration for what our futures look like. And that is resonant in a lot of the work. I think the deeper we dive, the more free we allow ourselves to kind of seek liberation in that work, the better off we'll be.
Well, and I think the other thing that's really important about that work is that it has this life beyond that one site, and that, you know, there are these, I call them monoliths, are, you know, representative of, you know, everywhere there was a lynching. And so there was a lady, and I'm sorry I don't remember your name, in the Monuments Labs session yesterday talking about, you know, she wants to have one of these pieces, but how do you get the community to have this conversation about bringing the piece and citing it? You know, it's a really, you know, sort of great, it's a huge challenge, but like what a wonderful opportunity to have this dialogue about, and to leverage the power of public art to have this dialogue. You know, I mean, I just think it's such an amazing time for the public art field, because, you know, the organization that created this monument is not it's not an arts organization. So, you know, they obviously recognize the power. So we got to take our power and use it. Yeah.
Great. So we're going to use the power of the microphone to see if there are any questions. I just wanted to throw in my own as a neutral moderator that I'm not supposed to do. I thought there would be more social media-oriented work this year, and in a way I'm happy there wasn't, but I think that's a trend that's sort of behind everything else. People are a lot more aware of what's happening in the world and in communities and cities, and that's all good for public art. If anyone has a really interesting question and want to walk to one of those standing microphones...
Anyone have wisdom?
Or if you'd rather just check out of the hotel early, that's okay. But we have time for one or two questions. If anyone, perhaps on the Pan Council, who won multiple awards, wants to ask or paraphrase anything. If not, we're going to just conclude and turn it over to Patricia. But first, Jack Becker.
Yes, hi. Thank you for all your efforts. I think one of the issues in terms of trying to see a much broader array of what's going on out there in the public art world is to let a lot more artists know that this is an opportunity. If the word just goes out to commissioning agencies or even major arts organizations, I think you're going to get a much more limited pool of applications that you might consider, or projects that you might consider in the future. So there are so many independent artists and artists working outside of those systems, and maybe they wouldn't, submit proposals. But I think if they knew that this was an opportunity for them to get visibility for their work at a national level, they might.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap it up unless there's one probing question. Okay. I hope this was helpful. We really wanted to place the awards and the honorees in the context of where we are as a field, as a country, as an interesting time to be alive.
Y'all are really lucky. I usually call on people if they don't raise their hands, so next time.
So,
can I just say one more thing? I just want to thank my fellow panelists. It was really such a pleasure to be working with these two, you know, I feel like we, you know, we came at it from different angles. Like Brian came up with our little 3-category system, and then Patrick helped us, you know, come to our final decision in a really great way. So it was a really great team. So thank you guys for, you know, the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, y'all. Thanks.
So thank you. That was the showstopper of the pre-conference. And now I am going to transition to thank everyone for joining us at the pre-conference this year. I think we learned about Denver. We learned about public art. And we come to these pre-conferences to sort of get out of our isolated department and deadlines, and the lawyer is making you do the 6th rewrite of his boilerplate language. You know, just talking to Uber drivers who happen to, for a living, digitize artwork so it can be conserved and dimensioned, and this is the guy getting $4 to drive 10 miles. Anyway, very interesting to learn about the economics of a place. The impact of public art in the civic realm is really vibrant in Denver, which the team has been great in making it all accessible and easy to enjoy. The PAN Council, thank you for letting me be the voice of your wisdom. I wanted to shout out to Caroline Vincent, the vice chair, the Nashville program director for public art. Stand up. I only agreed to be the chair if she would be the vice chair, and which means she has to take the minutes. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Denver. And we hope to see you in Minneapolis in a year. There'll be more about that in a minute, but I just have to say at one of our roundtables, the woman next to me is from Minneapolis. She said she had the Prince family permission to do a great mural in downtown Minneapolis, which we will see, and it made me think, what's the last name? The Prince family. So I looked it up, Nelson. Anyway, that's your preview for Minneapolis. We can look forward to great cuisine there, like fried Reuben balls, which is something I've had, and walleye fish. And that's enough about Minneapolis. We're going to bring Denver back to the stage in the form of Michael Chavez to wind up this portion. And thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Lester. Morning, Pan Pals. You still out there? Still with me? All right. Anybody here ever been to a Bruce Springsteen concert? Bruce, what's it like? What? It's awesome. What else? Loud. Long. Bruce plays for 3 hours if you've never seen him, which is a remarkable feat for anyone of any age, let alone a 68-year-old man. And when you see Bruce Springsteen, you know that you're not going to get the same show that you saw the night before in San Francisco or the night before that in Boston. You're going to get a uniquely crafted experience just for you. And he takes you through this whole range of emotions where you'll feel excited and euphoric, and you might want to cry at one point. You might want to hug the person next to you, whether you know them or not. And at about the 2 hour and the 45-minute mark, when your feet are killing you and you feel like you can't stand any longer and you're thinking, how is this 68-year-old man wearing me out? He makes one last push and takes you over the top. And you leave feeling completely spent and worn out, but inspired. And you feel like you've learned something. So we've, over the last couple days, given you all the energy of a 68-year-old rock star. I sincerely hope we've left you completely spent but inspired. And we hope that you've learned something. So 2 bits of homework. 1, see Bruce Springsteen. 2, come see us next year in Minneapolis. It will not be the same show you saw here in Denver. It will be a uniquely crafted experience just for you. And with that, on behalf of Public Art Team, Rudy, Mary, and Brendan, thank you for leading tours yesterday, and everyone else, and everyone here in Denver, thank you for allowing us to share our city with you. It's been a real honor.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you to Michael, thank you to Lester, thank you to our jurors, thank you to all of you who are presenters, our staff, everybody that's just been a fantastic sort of support as we've been able to make this great, wonderful day and a half here in Denver, and I think Michael wrapped it up all quite beautifully. I do have a few announcements, so I'm going to hold you here, or you're all just going to vanish and try to get your flight before we all leave. To stay connected moving forward, we have a couple ways to do that. We have the Public Art Network Listserv. This is a members-only event, but we highly recommend becoming a member just so you can become part of this listserv. It's our most active way to connect with over 400 of your closest colleagues and peers from across the country and beyond. Ask questions, talk about different topics, ideas, whatever you're dealing with within your program. It helps you kind of reach out to your colleagues that you may not have time to pick up the phone and talk to, but also get responses from a ton of people that are very thoughtful and just very smart group of people. We also recently launched a Pan monthly newsletter that will come out as well that sort of wraps up and talks about specific topics. We highlight numbers every month. It's been a really sort of fun thing to really re-energize. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media at Americans for Arts. And Renee's own next year and a half hashtag program that she's going to be on, Public Art Postcard, which is an Instagram project that she talked about yesterday. And then quickly, we recently launched, or earlier this year, we launched something called the Public Art Showcase. One thing we've always been asked of is how are there ways for you guys to showcase your works as you're doing them throughout your years and moving forward. So every month we pick a different topic. This month is going to be around art in airports. And we ask you to join us at this website at this time on Wednesday, June 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern to be able to post and talk to other people via Facebook, via the Facebook events platform to just chat with folks, share your images. It's been really kind of an interesting experiment that we've been doing for the past few months. It's been really quite fascinating to see the people that we've been connecting with. So for those that are staying and those that aren't, well, for those that are staying, this is what you have coming up for you. For those that aren't, you're about to get jealous because we've got a lot of other great stuff sort of happening for the next day and a half or so. We have a couple announcements. One, if you're a newcomers, the Newcomers Meet-and-Greet is still going on to 11:30 today, so if you want to go do that, you can. Also, for anybody who is from California, the California Public Art people are meeting in this room at the end of this program. So if you're really interested in sort of connecting with your different colleagues and talk about really sort of interesting and important topics that are relevant to California public art people for an hour. They're a great group of folks. I highly recommend sticking around to chat with them. Also, between 11:30 and noon today at the membership roundtable, which is just outside and sort of catty corner to us here, 3 of our council members, Julia Mooney-Moore, Caroline Vincent, and Jim Hirschfield, all agreed to kind of stay and kind of chat with you guys if you have any questions about what we do here at AFTA, what they do as a council, things like that. And then this afternoon, we have our first breakout session around public art. We dive deeper into monuments, public memory, and the role of the artist within that aspect. We are also trying something new, which is around case studies, where we have one particular program, in this case, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council outside of Boston, which is going to talk about their arts and planning toolkit, which is really fascinating about how they're really engaging their cities within their region to really do planning and connect the arts within that conversation. We also, at 4 o'clock today, come and join Renee Pachaki as she does her book signing of Trappings, Stories of Women, Power, and Clothing. And then between 4:30 and 6, we have 2 other public art-related breakout sessions, one on arts education and public art towards practice, which wraps up a multi-year program that myself and our arts education program manager have been working on to really kind of understand where these 2 fields really interact. So we're really excited about that. And then also programming and funding for public art in rural places. We know you're out there. We know you need more information. So we built a session just for you guys. And then just quickly tomorrow, if you love Tanya, today's her birthday, so make sure when you see her again, wish her happy birthday. Tomorrow she'll be meet the artist between 10:30 and 11 outside in our center stage area. And between 3 to 6, she's doing a really in-depth masterclass on promoting equity through craft, which I'm really excited about. And then for all the members, we have a Meet the Member reception tomorrow at 8 p.m. to 9:30. And I think that's the end of it. So thank you all again. I hope you had just as a wonderful time as I did here. It was amazing to see all of you again. I hope to see you all next year in Minneapolis. We're going to have another great and unique experience for you. And thank you all. And have a lovely and safe travel home. Thank you.